Hello, my name is Martina and I'm a tutor with the Adult Education. Hope you're all keeping well and keeping safe. We are doing these classes online because of the COVID-19 and the lockdown. So hopefully this will help you fill some of your time. Today I'm going to talk about creative writing, and maybe you have more time in your hands, so you might be able to give it a go. I'm going to start with some tips for writing. Now, to help you write well, it's a good idea to read as much and as widely as you can. So you're going to learn from others who have done it before you. Um, so it's good to read renowned authors who have a good reputation for writing good literature, because then you'll get familiar with good literature and you'll begin to recognize good literature, and it will also help you in your writing. Um, you learn new words, new vocabularies, the way writing can flow when it's written well. Um, so there's lots of authors out there that you can learn from. And it'll help you become aware of what you like, why a particular book would appeal to you, what you liked about it, and maybe what you didn't like about it. But you are becoming familiar with writing. So take every opportunity to read good literature, and that will help you in your own writing. Um, write about what you know. And I've always heard that advice, and it is good advice, because if you know a place or a setting, it'll be easier to write about that, because you'll be able to recall the details easily. They'll be in your head. You'll see the colours, the smells, the people. If you're setting your story in a place where you grew up, a town, you'll see the buildings. You'll know what the street looks like. So it'll make it easier and it'll be more authentic when you write about it. Um, but it's also important to write about things you don't know, because that's all part of creative writing, is using your imagination. So if you're writing about things you don't know, it's important to do your research. So you familiarize yourself with the setting. For example, if you were setting something on a beach and you're going to name that particular place in your story, it's important to find out what that beach looks like. Is it stony? Is it sandy? Do people swim there? Is it safe? All of those things, because if you've someone going swimming in what is known to locals as a treacherous place to swim, it might not be what your character would do. Um, yeah, yeah. So, and like if it's in a street that you're not familiar with, find out what is actually on that street, what kind of shops are on that street, um, what it looks like. And if your story is set in a completely fictional place, well, then it's up to you. But it's always good to pull ideas based in truth and based in things that you know about. You can put the fictional spin on them, but if they're based in something that is familiar with you, they will appear more real. Um, okay, just what else? Anything else I want to say about that? Yeah, and like um, when you're reading, like if you're reading a new piece of writing, um, if you come across words or vocabulary that you're not familiar with, you haven't heard before, write them down and look them up. Find out what they mean, because you might be able to use them then in your own writing, and you might come across a word you like the sound of, but you're not sure how you could use it. But if you write it down and look it up, then you have that. It is like doing a piece of research as you go along. Another important thing in writing a story is a hook. You need to grab the reader's attention straight off, make them interested in what's going to happen next. And that's not an easy thing to do. So another idea for that is look at the opening sentences of well-known books and, well, decide yourself. Some of them you might think, that's not that great, but more than likely the good authors, the books that are bestsellers, that are known throughout history, they are ones with interesting opening sentences that grab your attention, and it makes you think, oh, wonder what's going to happen here. So that's what you have to try and get into your writing as well, a hook. and to hold the interest. So everything is not revealed immediately. This little bits of information as the characters develop, as the story develops. Um, yeah, and show, don't tell. Now, by that I mean don't tell everything. Now, there has to be a certain amount of telling, but I'm just going to read an example of show and tell. Okay, so this first sentence is telling. Lucy was afraid to ring the bell. So we're telling it straight up. Lucy was afraid to ring the bell. We know that information now. So this is an example of showing that information. Lucy walked stiffly towards the door. She could feel her heart pounding in her ears. Her fingers hovered over the bell. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and pressed before she could change her mind again. So we learn an awful lot more about Lucy in that we can feel her fear, so it's a more interesting way because we're wondering, why is she so afraid to ring the bell? So that's an example of showing, not telling. There would always be a certain amount of telling because you have to set the scene and create the picture. I'll just give you another example. Jules was outside her comfort zone. So we're telling everybody that she was outside her comfort zone. So this is showing. Jules picked her way along the pavement, trying to avoid dog litter. Her high heels clattered each time the back slipped off. She had imagined herself striding confidently along, shoulders back, head held high. Instead, she had to pick her footsteps carefully and try to balance. She had only gone about 100 yards and already her feet stung. This glamour thing is totally overrated, she thought. She wished that she had worn her trainers. So, like, from that piece of writing, we know that Jules is not used to wearing high heels. It's very uncomfortable for her. She seems to be trying to be something that she's not. What does the dog litter on the pavement tell us? Well, the obvious is people don't pick up after the dogs wherever she is walking, but it also adds a kind of a feeling of, it adds to the uncomfort. It's creating an image, having to pick your way. It's obviously not a nice place to walk. So it's creating a whole different picture and it's pulling on our emotions. So it gives us a clearer picture of what Jules is going through. So yeah, so there's a few tips. Anything else I can tell you about that? Oh yeah, very important is spelling and grammar. Now, spelling and grammar are important, but like if you don't spell great, and your grammar is a bit dodgy, don't let that put you off writing, because the important thing is the narrative and the story, that you get that down. The grammar and spelling can be corrected at any time. But if you have a good story in your head, don't let your fear of spelling something wrong or putting a comma in the wrong place, don't let that stop you putting it down on paper, because all of that can be corrected. I mean, there's spell check now and all of those things, and you get so much proofreaders, whatever, but that's a minor thing. I mean, obviously you don't send it out to the public with spelling mistakes, but get it down on paper. All of those things can be checked at a later date, and just keep those things in mind. Right, well, one of the best things to do if you want to write is start writing. So I'm just going to give you a few exercises. Now, one of the things I would like you to do with the show and tell that I've talked about, find books or pieces of writing and find examples of that, so you begin to understand it. So you can see the difference between telling and showing. And there'll always be a little bit of telling as well, because if you show everything, that can get a bit tedious. But try and read stuff and pick out, oh yeah, there's an example of showing and telling and all of that. I would like to talk about characters, building characters. Again, like when you're creating characters, pulling from what you know is a good idea. I mean, by that I don't mean like you write about somebody down your street and you name them and all of that, but there might be pieces of their character that you could use in a character that you're creating. And if you're basing it on somebody real, without identifying them, of course, it's very authentic because you can see in your head how they walk, how they talk, their accent, everything. And it's much easier to base a character on a certain amount of truth. Like all fictional characters, there's always an element of truth in there. Um, and creating a character, it's very important to have a backstory. Where they're from, their gender, what age, maybe their economic status, have they had a privileged upbringing, have they struggled? All of those things are very important when you're creating character, the backstory. Now, the backstory mightn't be part of the main story, but it's always important for the writer to have the backstory about their character in their head when the character is speaking, because all of that information will inform how the character speaks, how they react to certain situations, how they deal with things. Um, so you want your character to be authentic, so they need to have a definite backstory. Yeah, because the backstory will inform everything that the character does, and it'll give you their accent. And also with a character, how do you know what a character is like? Now, this is a bit like the show and tell. You know what a character is like by what they do, by how they treat other people, and you'll also know as well by what they say. I always think of that book, The Grapes of Wrath by Steinbeck. There was um, just a small scene in that. I can't remember exactly, but there was two men in a car or a truck, and there was some sort of a fly or like a daddy long legs trapped inside the car on the windscreen. And the driver of the car, as far as I can remember, had picked up this guy. Just he was hitching a lift, and the driver of the car was looking at the bug on the window, and he was thinking, I should roll down the window and let the bug out. And while he was thinking that, the other guy that he'd given a lift to reached over and squashed the bug with his thumb. And I thought that showed two different characters. One was thinking about saving the bug and letting him out, and the other guy just killed him without a thought. And I always think it was a scene that stuck in my head because I said it's a very simple gesture, really, but it showed the two characters, and it was at the beginning of the book, so it gave the reader information about those two characters straight off. Um, yeah, dialogue. Dialogue, accent. It's kind of when you're writing, it's sometimes hard to write in an accent, but it's important. Because I suppose I'm from Kildare. Kildare is usually considered, people don't pronounce their THs. Now, I don't know, that's not true for everybody, but just as an example of setting somewhere in a particular, I suppose, Midlands, it's what they call sometimes the flat accent. So you might, people are known to say mother, father, brother. Um, so if you're writing that, you might write MOTER. That sounds like mutter. But if yes, if you kind of write in the dialect that the people speak, and it can be difficult, and it can be hard to read. I suppose you come across it more in plays rather than the novels, but it does add authenticity to a character if you can write in the dialect that they speak in. All right, okay, so that's a lot of tips now for you. And so I'll talk about some exercises. So one idea is if you collect pictures from magazines, books, postcards, even paintings, um, and you look at the pictures and you really see the detail and you try and see what emotion that picture evokes in you. Now, if it's a landscape, look at the landscape, the colours, everything, and the season, and try and write maybe a paragraph or half a page about that landscape, describing it, and try and get immersed into it, see what it evokes in you. Or a picture, say, with a person out in a, they might be lying back on a sun lounger or standing or whatever, but try and look at their face the details on their face. Are there any emotions on their face? What's going on in their head? Try and imagine who they are, where they're from, why they're there, um, and begin to write it down and see, can you create a story out of that? Look at their expressions. What surrounds them? Do they look wealthy? Do they look poor? Do they look happy? Are they content? Are they an imposter? All of these things. You can let your imagination go wild, but try and focus on the details. How they're sitting, do they look comfortable? All of those things, and try and write a page or a paragraph about that, and then look back on it and see, does it sound interesting? Do you want to know more about this character? Because sometimes pictures can stimulate ideas. The colors, you can imagine the sounds, you can imagine the smells, but starting from a picture sometimes is a good way to get your imagination flowing. Yeah. Another thing is to use objects. So a collection of objects, it could be anything. For example, I have it's just an old ashtray. It's an old player's ashtray. I don't know when it's from. It could be from the 60s. I don't know. But you don't see them around anymore. But the colours in that, it's bright, there's writing on it. It's definitely old, so you could create a whole story around an ashtray before all the smoking ban and all that, when people did smoke inside. Or I heard a story once about a dress that was left into a charity shop, an old style dress, and when they were hanging it up to sell, they looked in the pockets and they found a gold locket, a very old gold locket, with a picture of a man inside, this little heart-shaped locket, and they tried to find out where it came from. But I imagined the story of that locket, like who owned that locket. Obviously, it meant something to them. They'd kept it in the pocket, God knows for how many years, the picture of this man. Who was the other picture? Who was that person? What happened to them as a couple? So there's things like that. You can use your imagination. Just imagine those people, where they came from, how the locket ended up in there, what was their relationship. It could have been somebody's son, it could have been their husband. There's lots of ideas there. Also, if you just gather a bunch of objects and try and connect them with words and see how you can create a story, and see what an object evokes in you, what emotions you feel when you look at it. And also, if the object could talk, what would the object say? Now, that can be very useful for children's writing, which I'm going to talk about next. If you make things come to life. So if this object could talk, what would the object say? What would the story of that object be? Another good exercise is if you write out a list of words. I have to find my list here. It's on one of these pages. Yeah, up there. Oh yeah, okay. So if you make a list, and the list is colors, places, moods, foods, emotions, smells, objects, tastes. And for each of those words, you write 10 colors, you write 10 places, 10 moods, and so on. So you pick from your list, each list, you pick one color, you pick a place, you pick a mood, you pick a food, pick an emotion, pick a smell, pick an object, pick a taste. Now you might pick more than one from a list, but starting off, pick one and see what else you add to it, and try and connect them up into a story. So, for example, you want to bring a colour in. The sky was very blue. I know that's very obvious, but just the sky was very blue. It reflected on the water. Okay, I know they're very obvious, but if you understand what I'm saying, you try and connect them up and make a story out of it. And then the mood, let's say Laura sat sadly on the beach. Again, a bit obvious, but if you understand what I'm saying, you make the list and you try and connect up the colours and the places to create a story. So there are just some exercises that you can do to get your writing started. Anything else I want to say about that? Yeah, I suppose just write, get your words on paper, don't be afraid. And you can read them over and maybe ask some of your friends to read them and see what they think. Now, I would like to talk a bit about writing for children, because writing for children, a lot of people think that that's a cinch, anyone can do that. But children, there's different age groups, so your writing has to be aimed for each age group. So, for example, writing for children under 5, it's a very tight focus because you're talking about toddlers, early readers, and for any of you that are familiar with children's books, the early books, there might be one word on that page and a lot of colour and a lot of pictures. So immediately the colour grabs your attention. So children's books, the artwork is as important as the words. So it's there's not many words in writing for children under 5. There might be 1 or 2, maybe 3 words on a page, and then you move on to the next page. And they're not bombarded then with words and information, because they can't read or write at this point, but they're just learning, so they're just seeing shapes. So ensure that the vocabulary fits the age group. So length, obviously, like early readers, they can deal with a few more words, and it's good also if you're writing for children to be familiar with the curriculum that they're learning in school, because that'll help you write age-appropriate language, use age-appropriate language and words that they will be able to understand. And children have much more stimulation now, so it is harder to keep their attention and keep their focus. Like with technology and everything, it's actually harder to get children to read, because like they can switch on a button and they have sound and they have movement and it's all there instantly. So that's why it is actually harder to write for children now than it used to be. There's much more competition for their attention. And for younger children, a book or story needs to entice them straight away. And there's a rule, 3 R's: rhythm, rhyme, and repetition. Now, the repetition makes a child feel safe. If you're repeating sounds and words, they kind of know what's going to happen next, and children like that. And they can anticipate what's coming next, and it gives them excitement, because if you've ever read to small children, they know it off by heart, and if you say a word wrong, they'll tell you, you know. So the rhythm then, it's like the meter, the flow of the piece, almost like poetry, but there's a certain rhythm to a piece, and children like that too. And the rhyme, obviously, they like words that sound familiar. So as an exercise, think of a rhythm and write something that fits into that. Say, for instance, Mary had a little lamb, his fleece was white as snow. Try and write something that suits that rhythm, but with different words, just as an exercise. Or take a basic sound, as in och, clock, rock, and write something with a lot of those sounding words in, or any other rhyme, line, shine, pine. Mess around with rhymes, because children love rhymes as well. Okay, so yeah, keep your rhyming. Try and keep the rhyme going for as long as you can, and see where it goes. And like, because there sometimes there's a bit of nonsense, but that's okay, because that can be fun as well, and children like that. Now, alliteration and repetition. So alliteration is the same constant sound. So let's see, what have I written about that? So the same sounds over over and over again. Can't find what I've written about that. Oh yeah. Um, like say she sells seashells on the seashore. They're all S sounds. And again, that's something that children like because you can think back yourself. These are rhymes that have lasted the test of time. Um, and then words that sound the same, or words that sound like they look. Like meow, it's it sounds like what it should be. Sizzle, so you can imagine, you can see that word almost. You can see the sizzle. Um, so it mimics a sound. So the word itself mimics a sound like bang, clang, clink. You can you can see it, when you hear the words. And there are things that children like as well. Um, so keep the language clear for children. Now, I mean, as children get older, teenage writing can be more tricky because it's more sophisticated. They're looking for a bit more in their writing. Um, but as an exercise, another exercise, take an everyday object and maybe draw it, give it arms and legs and mouth, eyes, nose, ears, mouth. And what would it say? Because children love that as well. Objects that come alive, like cars that could talk. Um, so pick something, an object, and imagine what it would say, what it would tell you about its life. You know, it could be like an apple, an apple that doesn't want to get eaten. How's it going to avoid getting eaten? Um, what dangers might that object face? Like the apple, okay, is in big danger of being eaten and doesn't want to be eaten. So that could be a whole adventure. And keep the language clear and simple because you're remembering a children's attention span, and with all the other distractions that they have. So you need to keep it clear and sharp. Right. And remember, children are smarter than we think sometimes. Um, don't talk down or over explain things, let them come to their own conclusion. And children enjoy a challenge. Um, Something new, maybe new situations, maybe problems to solve. Um, and children want to read about children, not adults. They're not interested in adults. Um, Maybe they, doing well in an adult world, maybe outsmarting the adults. Children like that too. Um, and they do like a happy ending. We all like a happy ending. Um, so young children prefer happy ending. Older children can cope more with realistic life stories. Um, yeah. So 9 to 13-year-olds like a protagonist, a main character, and they like an antagonist as well, someone that causes problems and conflict with the main character. Um, Imaginary world and fantastical things and mystery. So for an older reader, yeah, a bit of conflict is they find that interesting, and I suppose they can imagine possibly themselves in those situations and overcoming it. It makes it interesting for them. Um, yeah. So younger children particularly like to save the day. If the character they identify with, they particularly like to save the day and be the hero. And again, read children's books. It's a good way to find out what's popular and the language to use. Pictures, the artwork's very important. And usually they're short, concise for the younger children. So that's all I'm going to say about creative writing today. At another point, I would like to talk about short stories. But thank you for your time and get writing.